What's up, guys? Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp extension tutorial for you. So in today's video, we're going to start a series on creating estimates from SketchUp models using the extension Quantifier Pro. So as most of you know, I am an estimator in my day job in addition to working on the SketchUp Essentials. So I've done a few estimates and I really wanted to mess with this extension and see how it could fit in this workflow and how we could use it to create estimates. So in addition to that, I think for the next, until the end of May, I believe these extensions, both Quantifier Pro and Profile Builder 3, are on sale for something like 30% off or something like that. So I figured this is a good time to talk about these anyway. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. So in this particular case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you how to interface this with Profile Builder 3. You don't necessarily have to do that. Quantifier can pick up things in groups and components without using Profile Builder, but it really kind of ties into the profiles and the assemblies inside of Profile Builder really well. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through and I just wanted to show you kind of my workflow for creating a concrete foundation, and then also how we would use that to create an estimate. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use Profile Builder in order to set up my concrete foundation wall. And in this case, my concrete foundation wall is going to look a lot like this. So it's going to be 3 feet deep, it's going to be 12 inches wide, and then it's going to be 3 feet deep and 12 inches wide. And then off the bottom, we're going to have a footer. So the footer is going to be 3 feet wide. So that would actually be 1'6" from here. And then 12 inches thick. And then 36 inches wide. Something like this. And so what I want to do is I want to create a pair of profiles inside of Profile Builder. And you can actually save these to your library so that you don't have to come back and keep redoing this over and over again. But we're going to start off and we're just going to add a profile. So I'm just going to select this, and then I'm going to click on the Profile dialog button. I'm just going to click the plus button. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to call this foundation wall 1 foot by 3 foot. And hit OK. And so you can see how what that does is that actually creates a profile in here based on this location. And so one thing I want to do, and it's going to get really important when we get into Profile Builder, is I want to set this foundation wall up so that it goes on a layer called foundation wall. So I'm just going to call this concrete FW. So I'm going to create a layer for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this gets placed on the concrete foundation wall layer. And so now, if I was to come in here and I was to add this, you can see how this will add this foundation wall in here based on where I click. And so we'll go ahead and leave that like it is for right now. One thing you might want to do is you might want to go ahead and place the insertion point at the top middle or something like that, depending on how you want this to come in. So if you're going to like create a concrete foundation that goes around the perimeter of this building, for example, if it's just a rectangular building, then you're probably going to want this to come in either centered on this line, or if you want this to be the outside or the inside line, you could adjust the insertion point so that this gets inserted based on where that line is. But for right now, I think this is doing what we want, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. And so in general, it's a good idea to have folders already set up where you want to keep these different profiles and assemblies. So in this case, I'm going to put this in the Foundation Walls folder, and I'm just going to click Save. And so now what I want to do is, in addition to having a profile called Foundation Walls, I also want to select this item right here, and I want to add another profile, and we're just going to call this Spread Footer. 3 foot 0 inches wide by 1 foot 0 inch thick, or D for deep. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Then we're just going to do the same thing here, where we're going to come in here and we're going to place this point at the top middle. And you can see how what that's going to do is that's going to do the same thing, where now I have this profile that'll get brought in based on whatever location I select. And so now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to save that to our library as well. And so now we've created the two profiles that represent our wall and our spread footer. Well, now what we need to do is build an assembly that incorporates both of those into a single assembly. And so what we need to do in this case, this is a fairly simple profile that we're going to add in here. This is a fairly simple assembly that we're going to add in here. So what I want to start off by doing is I want to start off by adding these two profile members as pieces of this profile. So I'm just going to click the plus button here. And in this case, because I've placed these in the model, I can go ahead and use pick from model. You could also click this button in order to select these based on the spread footer dialog. And one thing I forgot to do actually, and I want to go ahead and I want to do that real quick, is I want to add another layer for concrete spread footer. And I want to make sure that this item gets placed on the concrete spread footer layer. That's going to be important when we get into Quantifier. And I'm just going to save my changes by saving over that item that I already created. So now we're going to go back into our assembly dialog, and we're going to start, and I'm just going to pick an assembly from the model, and in this case, or a profile from the model. So I'm going to click on pick from model, and I'm going to click on this concrete foundation wall. So now this assembly, if I was to add it in here, contains just that concrete foundation wall. Well, the other thing we want to do is, in addition to the concrete foundation wall, we want to add another profile member, and in this case we're going to create this one as the spread footer. And so one thing you're going to notice about this is this got brought in a little bit weird, and this is nice because this gives us kind of a preview of what this is going to look like. But you can see how right now this assembly that I've created, it puts the spread footer way up above the concrete foundation wall, and that's because for some reason the up-down offset has been set to 3 feet. And so if we were to take that and put it back to 0 and then hit the tab key, you can see how this is going to update, and you can see what this is going to look like. And you can see how this assembly still isn't quite right, because right now this profile is being brought in at the same insertion point as the foundation wall profile. So what we want to do is we want to tell this that the actual spread footer needs to be put at an up-down offset of -3 feet. So I'm just going to type in -3 feet and hit the tab key, and you can see how now this assembly, if I was to add it right here, is going to get brought in with a foundation wall and a spread footer. And based on the way that we set this up, your foundation walls and your spread footers should be getting placed on this layer. And it looks like this one right here didn't quite get updated. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this. And we're actually going to use the profile item, and we're just going to bring that that spread footer in, and we're just going to make sure when we do that that we select the option for concrete spread footer for the layer. And so now when we hit OK, if we come back in and we update this, now that concrete spread footer is getting placed on that spread footer layer. So now what we have is we have an assembly where, let's say we have a building footprint like this one. I can select the perimeter for this assembly, and I can click on the button here for build along path, and that's going to add this whole assembly in here really quickly along that path. And so what that's done is that's allowed me to create an assembly that I can actually save and use for future projects. So if you use this assembly a lot of the time, you can come back in and use it in the future. And so what I'm going to do for this one is I'm just going to rename this one FW and maybe concrete foundation wall and spread footer assembly, 1 foot by 3 foot foundation wall, 3 foot by 1 foot spread footer. Something like that. You'll have to come up with your own naming convention, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. I'm just going to put this in that same folder, and make sure you have the word assembly in here. And one thing you might want to consider is you might want to consider naming these with the word assembly on the front or the word profile on the front, just so you can tell the difference when you're looking at this quickly. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that, and now I can open that in future models. Well, now what we've done is we've come in here and we've created this assembly with our foundation walls. Well, now we want to use the extension Quantifier in order to generate an estimate. And so what I want to do is, first of all, I want to erase out all of this extra stuff over here, because this stuff isn't really going to have anything to do with my building. So what I want to do is I want to move this item over here, and now let's go ahead and look at what we can do with Quantifier. And so with Quantifier, what we can do is we can come in here and we can click on this button right here, and what that's going to allow us to do is that's going to allow us to come in here and make some changes and adjust some different reports and things like that, as well as adjust our costs. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at our costs. And what we need to do is we need to apply a cost to our concrete foundation wall, and we need to apply a cost to our concrete spread footer in order to get a full price. And so the easiest way to do this based on the way we set this up is to do this by layer. And so when I click on this, what this is going to do is this is going to pop up a little window for layer cost data where I can enter information about the things on each layer. And so this is why it was important for us to put our items on layers, is because that's how we're going to apply our cost. And we're going to start with our concrete spread footer because I'm going to do that a really easy way. So in this case, I want to apply data to the concrete spread footer layer. So I'm just going to click this drop down and click on concrete spread footer, and I'm just going to click the plus button right here. And so what that does is that adds a cost item that's going to get associated with anything on this layer. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to price this based on the cubic yardage of the concrete spread footer. So for this item, we're only going to do this based on a cubic yardage cost. We're not going to do all of the detail and stuff like this, just to give you kind of an idea of what this can do. And so we've selected this, and I'm probably going to go ahead and add a code in here. So you might do 0301 or something like that, depending on how you set up your estimates. I would probably also add this in here, concrete spread footer, 3 foot wide by 1 foot deep. And then the other thing I would do is I would apply a unit cost to this. And I'm not 100% sure if this is exactly right, but let's say that this thing was going to go into the ground at a unit cost of $850 per cubic yard. And then from a waste standpoint, I'm going to add 15%. And we'll go ahead and add tax. So we'll say this is 7.62 or something like that. And then we're going to go ahead and click OK. Well, now what that's going to do is that's going to come in here, and you can see how now I have cost associated with that item because we've added that in here. And so let's say that we were to double click on this, and you can see how this is a solid group, so we can see what the volume is. And so you can see how this is in here as cubic feet. So this item has a yardage of 542 cubic feet. So if we were to take 542 cubic feet, we got to divide it by 27 to get to yards, and then take it times 850. We're at about 17,000. But then we need to make sure that we add in our waste and also our tax. And when you add that in, you can see how that gets pretty close to the cost that's being associated right here. I'm assuming this is probably a rounding difference or something like that. But you can see how this goes in there, and this applies that cost based on that cubic yardage. And so now what we want to do is we want to do the same thing for the items contained in our foundation walls. So to do that, we're just going to click on Layer again. And one thing I want to note is notice now when I click on this drop down, this layer shows up with a little $sign here. That means that there's now a cost associated with this layer. But what I want to do is I want to add some more detail in here for our concrete foundation wall. And in this case, I'm just going to click on the plus button again. And let's say we wanted to get a little more detailed with this. What we could do is we could do 03, 02, 01, or whatever your code would be. And we could call this item concrete foundation wall formwork. Something like that. Well, in this case, for the foundation wall, you'd figure your formwork in square feet because it's going to be the footage of formwork that you're going to place over this wall. And I'm not 100% sure at all what formwork is running a square foot, so we'll just call it $20. And you can add a waste factor in here if you want, and a tax factor. And then what we're going to do is, in addition to the concrete formwork, you can add multiple items to each layer. So for this one, for example, we would call this one concrete foundation wall, concrete material. And maybe I'd code this 03, 02, 02. And we would do this in cubic yards again, and let's say this concrete was going for about $150 a cubic yard, and our tax rate is going to be 7.62, and we'll go ahead and add 15% waste in there as well. So you can see how you can apply this to different things based on, or you can add different things to your cost based on what you need in here. And so let's do one more, and in this case let's do something a little more complex. So let's say now that we wanted to figure the number of man hours in here. So let's say that we wanted to figure labor or something like that. Well, what we'd do is we would figure out how many square feet an hour someone could put in place, right? So we would label this concrete foundation wall dash formwork labor. And the input would be square feet, because they're going to put a certain number of square feet in an hour. And let's say they put like 8 square feet an hour in or something like that. So what we would do is we wouldn't actually do 8 square feet. We would do the opposite of that. Because let's say, so we would do 0.125 man hours per square feet, and then we would call this unit man hours. And let's say that our cost is going to be something like, we'll say $35 an hour or something like that. Well, I'm not going to add, you might add waste. I don't think I'm going to add tax to that one. It's not a material cost, so I don't think you would add tax, but you could use this to calculate your man hour cost as well. So then I'm going to click OK. And so now if I click on this, you can see how my cost is in here at $41,000. And so that's just the cost associated with each one of these items. And one cool thing about this is if you want to see which cost is associated with which items, you can click on the button right here for Cost Inspector. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to click on different items inside of your model. And you may have to go inside this group, but you can see how, for example, on my foundation walls, I can see that I have a square footage cost and how it's calculating that for my formwork. You can see how I have a concrete material cost, which is calculating based on the amount of concrete material in here, and then I have a labor cost, which is calculating based on the square footage of formwork that has to be put in place. And there's other things that we'd figure in here as well, but you can see how this cost inspector allows you to look at things really quickly and see what costs are associated with these different items. And so to wrap this up, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to export a report. And so what I want to do is I want to export a report from the Quantifier Pro window that allows me to see exactly what's contained in here. So the way that you're going to do that is you're going to select, you want to make sure you select the whole thing, not just a single item. If you notice, if you just click on the foundation wall item inside your group, you only get the cost for that foundation wall item. Well, in this case, I want the cost for both, so I'm going to make sure that I've got the whole thing selected. And then we're just going to go in here and we're going to select the option for Cost Detail Report. And we're going to click on the button for Create Report. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to come in here and that's going to generate a report based on the different costs that we have associated in this estimate. So you can see how I've got just my cubic yardage cost up here for my concrete spread footer, and then I've also got my costs down below for other things like formwork and concrete material and stuff like that. And so you could also, if you wanted to, let's say that you had just some items in here that just needed to be associated with this estimate that don't need to be associated with the foundation wall or the spread footer. Like let's say, for example, you have a mobilization cost, so you have to get equipment out to the site or something like that. Well, what you would do is you would click on this button for model dollars, and you can see how it says that this cost data gets applied independently of the actual objects in your model. What that means is it's basically like a lump sum value that you can add in here. So what I would do in this case is I would call this something like mobilization costs, and what we would do is we would call our unit just lump sum, and for our unit cost we'd say it's going to be $2,500. And make sure that you code this, and the way that you code this is going to affect how this cost is going to show up inside of your reports. So in this case I'm going to code this to something like division 1, and I'm going to click OK. Well, now if I run this report, I'll have a mobilization cost in here with a unit cost and a total cost, as well as my other items as well. And then this video is getting a little bit long, but probably what you could do is and so sometimes you need to do some other calculations on this. Like, let's say for example you need to add some markups or some things below the line. What you would do is you can take this and you can actually export it to a CSV file that you can open up in Microsoft Excel. So let's say for example I wanted to export this to Excel. This is going to export this as a comma separated value file, and so I'm just going to leave this as is. We're just going to say that the comma is what it's going to read as a separate column when it brings this in, but we'll go ahead and we'll put this in a different folder. We'll go ahead and click save, and then it's going to ask if we want to open this report. And I'm not 100% sure if this works if you don't have Excel installed. I do, so I'm just going to click on yes. But what that's going to do is that's going to bring that cost detail report into Microsoft Excel, where you can then view it. So what I could do is I could set this whole thing up where I have like fee or something like that. So we could summarize these items here, and then probably what I would do actually is I would take my fee and put a percentage right here. So let's say my fee was going to be like 10% or something like that. Maybe what you do is set this up with a subtotal, and then you would take this times your fee percentage, and then you could have an overall total. So you can see how bringing this into Microsoft Excel is really easy for you to do your final estimating and your final totals and things like that. So I really like how easy it is to take this data once you have an idea of how everything is set up and export it to Microsoft Excel for quick use in estimates and things like that. Alright, so I might have gone a little bit fast. I'm not 100% sure. So leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. If this was helpful to you, if it made sense. I just love having that SketchUp conversation, and I guess that estimating conversation with you guys as well. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps, even if it's only $1 a month. So make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.